Today on Deep Thoughts, I'm going to riff on discipline. Discipline's a very interesting thing. It is sort of the basis of any level of success, aside from serendipity. But even serendipity comes with a lot of discipline before you get the chance of a lifetime. Take people like Elvis Presley, who walked into a record studio, recorded a single, and blew up, right? He still knew how to sing, right? His discipline to sing was all achieved before he got the opportunity to record his voice. Why talk about discipline? Well, let's just say that there's a financial correction headed your way. One that's going to be instilled on the entire planet of at least all first world countries and some aspiring third world countries that are trying to be first world countries. Your discipline will be the only thing that will keep you employed and give you a chance at surviving anything catastrophic. Now, it's on one side of the spectrum. On the other side of the spectrum, you just need to satisfy your soul to get the goals that you want in life. And discipline is the only way to pull it off. Now, there's a couple types of discipline. There's self-discipline. And then I believe that there's a group discipline. For those of you who go to the gym and you have a gym partner, you know what it's all about. You want to quit, but your partner says, go, 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 go. Some of us are very good at self-disciplining, but even those of us who have had at tremendous levels of success self-disciplining, we go through cycles where we don't. And it's up to us to kick our own asses, right? So I want to talk about a bit of that process, but I also want to bring it down to the humanity level of it's okay to lose your grip on things. It's okay to slip every once in a while. And I don't think a lot of people say that. Everything's an absolute. Everything is you're either fat or you're thin. You're either disciplined or you're not disciplined, right? Whatever you're doing, you're either totally in or you're totally out. And that's bullshit. That's not the way the world works. And I find that a lot of times when I get people to get their goals, it's by first just saying, look, you're not going to always succeed every single day. And I've said it several times in these essays and these deep thoughts that that's just the way it really works. But a lot of times what happens is if you're trying to discipline yourself, and especially the more that you want the goal, or the more that you've had the goals in the past when you've had luck and discipline meet and you had these credible successes, sometimes you can't recreate luck, right? Luck is what I call hard work, but there are opportunities that show up as well. So when you catch yourself with no one really helping you, all right, you tend to give up every once in a while. And it's okay to give up on a particular day. It's okay to give up on a particular hour. What you need to do is find a way to get back into it eventually, and sooner than later, but don't let the sooner description become a problematic thought for you, right? So I was going to share some of my own experiences and go sort of postulate through some experiences that you may be going through as well, and ones that I've seen my employees go through. Because what's really strange about discipline, and discipline relates to your level of attention to detail. It really is your mechanism to set the bar on any level. So Kyle and I talk about a lot of times that we're really glad we didn't grow up with the internet. And the number one reason why I say that is I know that all that I am good at today would never have existed had I had the internet to distract me and cell phones. I was an only child, and I always had aunts and uncles around me that were relatively close to my age and a couple cousins. But in the end, I spent time at home by myself, and I get bored. I tell my mom I was bored. And she actually had 4 brothers and sisters, but they didn't start showing up until she was 9. So she had 9 years of growing up by herself. And so what she said, quite frankly, she just said, look, you got to go find something to do. And you need to draw. You need to play some game with yourself. You need to chill out with your Hot Wheels. Do whatever you got to do. Go out and play with some friends, whatever you need to do. And that foundational mechanism, that pattern that I was constantly in of waking up and going, oh, well, I'm bored again. Well, that means I got to go and be unbored, right? Eventually that turned into tremendous amount of drawings, turned into paintings. It eventually turned into software, computer code, and I'd manifest all my skills through that. At the same time, I'd study music, both from an enjoying standpoint and then trying to learn how to play it. My story with learning how to play music is actually pretty funny. I couldn't afford a keyboard. And there was a couple pianos, at my grandmother's houses, but that's exhibition and playing, right? You're trying to practice and everybody can hear you screw up. And I had lessons for I swear to God, a couple days as a child, 5 or 6 years old. The way I learned how to play music and to read music was that I programmed a keyboard inside my computer because it was able to do music tones. And so I started getting sheet music out, and then just putting it into the software code, and I could play it. It was cool. And I rigged up my keyboard to play, a few octaves. And I didn't really write a sequencer. I did always put it in by hand. But anyway, it gave me what I needed to know. I mention that because this whole process of getting bored, because I think that a lot of you, or at least 40 and over, you probably had a very similar childhood where you had to make something take place. My co-host Kyle learned how to play the guitar very young and really got deep into the albums that really inspired him, the Black Sabbaths and all the heavier tunes that he got into, which then shaped the kind of music that he wanted to make. I think it's important to remember how it was in case you're stuck in the way it is, right? When I was a kid, there was sort of this mean or this constant of if everyone else is doing it, that's the last thing I want to be doing, just instantaneously. If everyone dressed a certain way, I wouldn't want to dress like them. If they all listen to certain types of music, well, at a minimum, I'd listen to their music too, but I'd also listen to music that I knew that they would like if they listened to it, but they wouldn't know where it came from. And that was the cool thing about it. Now you have Shazam. You just hold up your phone to someone's car and you can steal where they got their music from. But it used to be a really big deal back in the day. I remember a few bands that I used to use to freak people out. Techno music was barely understood in the 80s at all. You had essentially your Euro pop stuff, and you had your American glam metal. And then, of course, you had your 70s bleeding up through that. But there's a band named Kraftwerk, which I think a lot of you probably know of, and they had sort of pioneered electronic music in 1976 with Autobahn. But they came out with all these crazy cool albums, and in the mid 80s they came out with one called I think Music Nonstop, and it just was super cool. And so we would get some of the loudest stereos we could in Auto's cars, and we'd drive around with this music, and it was just banging, really cool music, and people would hear it and they instantly want it, but they don't know where you got it, and so that made you look cool. It was kind of fun that way. The other artist, I should say, was that people liked rap. And it was just starting to, Run DMC doing Walk This Way was when America finally said, okay, we like rap. It's cool. Lots of kids liked it before America came on board, right? Then we had LL Cool J. And he was sort of an unknown name. And he just took everything up a new notch, right? His lyrics were dense, they were tough, and they were constructive, which was cool. Like, he would kind of tell you how to have discipline in your life. I mentioned that as a segue to an experience that I had. I'm going to jump around just a little bit chronologically so you don't get completely bored out of your mind. Too late. I moved to California at 17, like I've said several times. I was 18 very quickly after I got here. But I moved out here with a car that had serious issues. It was like my carburetor had a dead spot in it, such that when you hit the gas, it was a 1976 Dodge Charger Special Edition, which looks just like a Cordoba. It does not look like the General Lee, unfortunately. It had a bust-up stereo. Like I had a pin coming out from a volume knob, but the speakers were great. It sounded awesome. I did a good job with it. And my friends used to call it the Cholo Mobile, which is funny. I had in my car LL Cool J's second album called Bigger and Deafer. I already had digested the first one called Radio. And he has a song called Breakthrough. And at no point during the lyrics of this song does he say breakthrough, which is very interesting for me. Breakthrough is one horrendous verse. It is massive. There's no breaks. He just goes from start to finish. And if you like, I learned how to do the rap, and I would do it in my car. It would just, I mean, even at 18, 19 years old, which is the age he did it in, because he's about a year and a half older than me, you're just breathless. Like, it's the most amazing compilation of lyrics. The Breakthrough is all about him getting started in rap and how they treated him in New York. He's from Queens, St. Albans, Queens. And that when he would leave New York, people loved him and celebrated him. And as he came back to New York, people would start acting like suckers, trying to get money off of him and all this other stuff, which is very funny because that's sort of the parable of Jesus as well. Like, when he came back to his Nazareth, they treated him like, you're just the carpenter kid, you know. That song was just running in my car when I was out here by myself, and you know, I was super duper excited to be in California, but I was also terrified at the same time that I wouldn't be able to make it work, wouldn't be able to make enough money, you know. Very quickly that all went away in terms of money and success and that kind of stuff, because again, like I said, survival's easy, success is a drag. But this song, and I won't try to redo it for you here, but he's got a lot of amazing lyrics. Like, when you're rich, you get friends, but when you're poor, you're alone. That kind of stuff. Stop living off your parents like you're 3 years old. You know, he was like, basically, you know, stop talking about me and stop, you know, trashing me. You're living with your parents. You know, like, he kept challenging you to get to the next level of excellence. And so the reason why I mention this is that discipline always comes with a goal. There is no discipline without a goal, ever. You want to keep your house clean, you need that goal, and then you discipline yourself to keep your house clean. You want to improve your job? Well, that's your goal, and you have to have discipline to get it, right? So one does not travel without the other. And I think, unfortunately, they're discussed in separate containers and never brought together in the same experiment. Let's talk about goals for 1 second so we can get to some discipline. If you live in America, then you are sold bullshit constantly. And those concepts that aren't true, that no longer really help you out, start to make you slip. You know, there's something called the class reunion. And I think that when I think of my class reunion, especially, like, no one cares anymore after like the 20th, you don't care. There comes a point when a lot of people don't show up to these things. And one of the reasons they don't want to show up is because they've slipped in their mind. They didn't get the goals that they thought were a minimum level of goals to be acceptable when going back home and seeing their friends. It's never usually true. No one ever really cares. The 10th anniversary is the weirdest one. It's where everyone goes back and tries to size everybody up. But after the 10th, like my father said way back when, he goes, we're just glad everyone else is alive. We're glad we're seeing anybody, right? It's cool. I find that what's really interesting is that, you know, in America, we eat badly. And so we get fat. By our definition, we get fat. By our definition, we do not look the way we want to look. And so we tend to try to catchphrase it. Like I said, you catchphrase it up to say, well, you know, this is table muscle, or, you know, whatever. Or this is, I had someone tell me once, well, this is just what happens when you get old. You just get fat. It's like, come on, really? Really? My uncle's 82 years old. He's just the way he was when he was 42, you know? My grandmother just all died straight bean poles, no problem. Most of my aunts and uncles are all the same size as they were when they were 30 at least, right? So it's bullshit that you have to somehow let yourself go. However, if it does happen, no one needs to freak out. You don't need to look in the mirror and go, oh my God, what have I done? I'm not exactly my weight that I want to be. And it doesn't have to be your high school weight. No one's ever going to be their high school weight. You gain bone mass over the course of your entire life. There's no way you can have your look from high school. Our noses and ears keep growing, right? That's the other weird thing that really changes our faces. As well, any expression you make with your face on a regular basis will create wrinkles and it'll sculpt your face. So you have to be a little bit careful. I've got friends of mine who do frowning things when they get surprised, and they actually kind of are smiling, frowning, but they'll sit there and create these giant, crevices in their face because a frown does that to you, right? You probably don't want to be Botox, God either, and you never have any expression, which is sort of me. But I don't do any facial chemicals of any kind. But I'm very stoic. I'm very just sort of monotone, So if we vary or waver from our goal set that we make when we're idealistic kids, a few things have to happen, right? We have to reevaluate what we think is important. Now I'm going to stick on eating for just a little bit here because it's a tough one. Everyone has to eat to stay alive. And yet, if life gets depressing, or if something gets stressful, whether it be a genetic stress trigger that you simply have because that's just the way you're built, I've got plenty of friends like this, or if it's just something that grew as an addiction, you didn't mean it to get out of control, but it did. It just did. It's no need to panic, But again, we have to decide whether or not it's something that you care about enough to change. A lot of times people think that change is something that they don't want in their life, but it turns out that they actually do enjoy it. When we go on vacation, I think it's really funny. People who say they don't like change. Now, some people that never go on vacations, but it doesn't have to be Hawaii or Europe. It can just be going down to the lake. The brain likes change, honestly. The brain likes new patterns in the mind. That's why human beings explore new vistas, because they get to see something different. There's probably some of you who've traveled the United States or the world, and when you went to certain locations, you had these giant sort of epiphanies of, I feel like I've been here before, or this just feels really good. And who knows, maybe all that's true. That it feels good and you've been there before. Usually we fear the unknown, and the other half of that is that we fear failing. I've run into this a lot lately in the last couple of years of my life. The amount of people who've terrified of failing and therefore never try anything new is astonishing. I dated a person who was in her late 40s who didn't know how to ride a bike, but had 2 daughters. How does that happen? How do you not work it out where you're like, okay, I didn't learn how to ride a bike. Not my fault. My parents didn't make this happen for me, so whatever, I'm going to go learn how to do it. Because I have 2 kids that should know how to ride a bike, and if mom doesn't know how to ride a bike, then how the hell are we going to make this work, right? Sadly, a lot of these parents live in places where kids can't ride bikes because it's just too downtown, But that's where fear is hurting not only the person that has got the fear, but it's hurting the offspring, technically speaking. But there's been no goal to fix it. And I think that I'm going to harp on goals for a little while because I want to make sure that we understand how to pitch goals to ourselves. Because discipline is directly related to how passionate your goal set is. Discipline becomes easier the clearer that your goal is. Now, Tony Robbins, who I've mentioned a few times on previous shows, he has a technique. And what's interesting about Tony is that I bought his cassettes back in the early 90s, by 93, and I listened to him from 93 to 96 over and over and over again. And his technique is actually pretty clean. But before I talk about his technique, the funny thing is that here I am, this conspiracy guy, right? Which I don't like being necessarily. You just need to understand, whatever. I wish life was totally normal pre 9/11. But one of my buddies who's absolutely non-conspiratorial, who's this brilliant writer, he said, he goes, oh yeah, I read all about this guy. He goes, he's an ex-CIA guy. And that he was taught how to control the mind at the CIA, and he popped out and created his little cassette program. I thought, whoa, this guy's extremely well-connected and extremely versed in that. So I didn't know that about Tony. And Tony tells the big standard story. If you look at any of the infomercials where someone's talking about making you rich, they talk about their own story. They give you this line of crap about how they were in a 1-bedroom apartment, on welfare or whatever, and all of a sudden they did what they're about to sell you, and they're now gazillionaires. And let's just say Tony is a gazillionaire, right? I don't know what island he owns or whatever, but he flies a helicopter around and all this other stuff, right? Now, Tony's big thing is to say you can get your goals as long as you can see them. And to take the ones that you're currently manifesting, the ones that are making you upset enough to buy the program from Tony, and you need to attach pain to it such that the resolve is natural. Because what he was taught at the CIA was that the brain automatically navigates away from pain. But if you do not map pain to what you dislike, you won't naturally move away from it. But you can't just map pain. You can't just sit in a vacuum and say, wow, I'm 50 pounds overweight. How this happened to me, hate, and somehow you're going to lose weight. No. That's not going to work. You have to have a goal that is very specific, bright, and happy. Because the journey is not supposed to be negative. The journey is supposed to be positive. Your journey is to get to the thing that you want to get to. And you need to just start off right away with whatever goal you set. And I don't give a crap if it's cleaning your house one time. Cleaning out the garage, washing your car that one time, lifting weights that one time. My recommendation is to approach it from the standpoint that it's euphoric. I get to do this. If I said to you guys, all you got to do is comment on the video down below, and I will contact you and mail you tickets to Hawaii for 1 month, all expense paid, VIP, everything. Everyone would reply down there because you want the change in your life to not work, be pampered, and go to Hawaii. You should. You should love that idea. Sorry, I can't pull that off for everybody. But to the degree that concept sounds interesting, especially if any of you have been there before, you'll definitely know it's amazing. My little story about Hawaii goes in a couple sentences. It was so hyped to me before I went that I thought, no way. I live in Huntington Beach, man. I live 3.5 miles from one of the most gorgeous beaches on planet Earth. And I thought, well, how could it be better? I mean, so much better that I would just feel blown away, right? Because we have tourist chaps here too. As soon as I got off the freaking plane, I was in the old wing of the old Honolulu airport. And it was like walking into Don Ho's world or Elvis Presley's world. Or the Rat Pack's world, right? I instantaneously fell in love with the mountains, the trees, just all the beaches, and it was just amazing. The music, the food, the people. It's just amazing. Oahu is the only place I've ever been, but I'm ready to go back and live for months, right? That's how happy we have to be, or excited we have to be to go get any one of our goals. And what's cool about a goal is that you can write it down on paper, and it can be as fanciful as you can imagine it. I have done things in my life that if I looked at the facts on paper first, the likelihood of me succeeding with something first, I would have chased myself away from even trying. When I was about 23 years old, like I said, I worked for that pharmaceutical company for a couple of years. At the same exact time, I'm working a full 8-hour shift at this pharmaceutical company. I was coming home and working another 4 to 6 every single night, writing a product that did a bunch of visual stuff for database people. And when I shared it with a couple people that I was making this product, I had a lot of people around me saying, oh, well, tons of people are doing that product right now. There's no reason to even try. Because I'm a really young kid. To me, I wasn't a child. To me, at 23, I was a full-blown adult, acting like an adult, living like an adult, prioritizing my life, making money like an adult. And so, I'd had at that point, I'd had 5 years of working as an adult. From 18 to 23, I was never in a kiddie job, ever, right? Even when I drew video games at 19, it was intense. But none of the other guys were any, younger than me. But it turns out at the end of this journey, I was the only one to finish the product that everyone else was supposedly programming. And I've told this story before on one of the other essays, but I wanted to say it again because it was that goal that I had, that it was a opportune time to make a product that didn't exist, and I had Fortune 1000 clients, which is one of them was this pharmaceutical company, that would immediately start using it. And they did. The whole place, we're talking, I think it was like 300 coders had to use this product. They had to, as a matter of protocol in the company, to make their windows look the way that they should have looked. And essentially what it did was it aligned everything. So everybody who's these programmers that had never done GUI before, they all done DOS programming, didn't know how to put a field in a label and make sure it had a colon or not a colon and justify it properly. So you just run it through my product, and I would mathematically figure out how close everything was, and I would deduce that there were relationships between labels and fields, and I turn rectangles into 3D things, and I even draw rectangles for you, put icons and buttons, and then align everything constantly and color scheme the whole thing properly. So it's really cool. But what that taught me was that if you don't dream big, nothing's going to happen in your life. Like, you won't walk into the room to even try, right? You got to try. You have to say to yourself, there's nothing different between me and the people that I admire who do what I love. Now, if you're, depending on what age you are, depending on what you want to do, you're going to have, again, like I said, more steps to complete your goal, right? So some of us have 10 steps, 1 through 10. Some of us have 1,000 steps. And some of us, most of us, we have no idea how many steps it's going to take to make it happen. I programmed every single night for a year. I had Metallica's Don't Tread on Me, the Black Album, blasting in my ears the entire time. I made it. And I've had dozens and dozens of those situations happen where I start a project and I'm terrified. I've never done it before, but I took the terror and that energy of doubt and I translate it into energy to accomplish things. And I just simply say, look, I have the discipline never to stop until I'm finished. If I'm painting a painting and it just turns out badly, I'll just paint over it until I get it right. When I was a kid, I used to paint all the time. And I'd paint on business walls, right? And one of them, it was funny. I was painting all kinds of stuff at home and selling paintings and stuff just as a teenager in high school and junior high. And one time they called me in high school and they said, there's a new bar downtown, and it eventually turned out to be a kiddie bar, but this was when it was an adult bar. And they said, hey, we want you to come down and paint an Iron Maiden cover on the wall. And I wasn't into Iron Maiden at the time. I didn't have anything against the music. I just didn't know him very well. But I loved Eddie, this crazy skullified character, right? And I would draw him all the time. But I hadn't, painted it, for God's sakes, right? And there, if you know the cover that they have where Eddie is bald and he's in a straight jacket and he's in this padded room, that was the album cover they wanted me to do. But I wasn't old enough to actually be in the establishment, which was kind of funny. It was a small town, no big deal. So I go down there and they get these red ropes, like you have at a movie theater, right? And they just roped off this wall. And they gave me the album cover, and I brought all my paints, and I just started painting right on the wall. No sketching or anything. I just started painting all this stuff, and I could kick myself for not taking a photograph. But back in those days, it was film and all this other stuff. But I painted, and I just kept coming down, and people would sit there and drink and just watch me paint. It was cool. And I was terrified I was going to screw that painting up, but it turned out to be really cool. At least I think it did. I don't have a picture. But the number of times I've done projects like that is countless. I don't know how many times I've walked into a project and said, well, I'm going to do it no matter what. Recently, in the last couple of years, I painted 2 guitars on a wall, 2 Flying V guitars on a restaurant. It's kind of a rock and roll theme restaurant down the street. And I hadn't painted on a wall in 10 years at least. And so I'm like, wow, I got to knock this one out. I'm 10 to 15 years better than I used to be, so I got to make this happen. But I haven't painted anything in a really long time. So I was like, okay, I got to figure out a technique. These guitars can't be sloppy. They have to be exactly precise, physically. And so I just devised a technique. I went and got some cardboard. I cut out a cardboard template of a guitar, and I measured out a real guitar and then made it a little bit bigger and put up all the pickups and all the wires and all this other stuff, then put it on the wall. I painted one guitar base, and it was okay. I painted the second one. I screwed it up completely and had to repaint it again. I tell you that story because that's going to have to be the way that you approach all of your goals. Don't be the slightest bit afraid to fail. And then this discipline thing will come as a driving force to help you persevere. And I'll get into the discipline thing here in a second. A lot of things in life that we want that we don't have require projects. And if you go talk to a lot of business owners where you actually have the privilege of talking to the person who invented the business, and they make a product of any kind, a household product or some crazy, oil rig thing, you typically get the same story where, at least at the inception product, right? Because a lot of companies will make, one guy made a faucet at his house, and he started selling faucets, and then it turns into this multi-billion-dollar company where they just have, machines that think things up for you, right? I'm joking, but there's always a story at the beginning. Take Apple Computer. Steve Wozniak was a geek, and he was like, hey, this is a really cool thing, and I want to make a computer that's tiny, that uses very few chips, but is very powerful, has a powerful language that can render color to a screen and can play music and all kinds of stuff. And so it was his passion, which then made the discipline of what he was doing extremely easy. No one had to walk in and remind Steve Wozniak to work on the Apple I. Nobody had to. Now, Steve Jobs walked in as his good friend eventually and said, I think it might be better like this or better like that. We need to put a really cool case around it so it looks really neat. Why don't we build this thing completely finished instead of having it sort of like a Heath kit where you buy it in pieces and then you have to solder everything together and plug the chips in? Because why don't we just do it ourselves, right? And so Steve went off and hocked his VW bus to buy the mold, which is going to cost a ton of cash, and they sold 50 computers to a local computer store, but they didn't have anything built. Wozniak was able to get a lot of chips out of Hewlett-Packard, where he worked. And Steve Jobs worked at Atari part-time, working on the Breakout game. And so they both had the sensibility of how to conserve money and make a really great game, or great computer. But then for both of them, because they were very young as well, they weren't, I say young because they weren't jaded by what they can't do. We're going to get into people that jade us. We're going to get into the way we get jaded ourselves as well. But you think about it. For those of us in computers today, there's probably a very few people who didn't fantasize about going back to the 70s and creating your own computer or helping those who created the computers that we liked, right? Now, I grew up, and I've said this before, I grew up with family members that were very competitive with me and friends that were very competitive with me. And what I've discovered is that I think the fueling of their competitiveness went something like this. They could not find a goal that motivated them, or they went at it a wonky way such that they couldn't actually reach their goals. Maybe it's just fear. So anytime someone got in their circle of life and was succeeding and found the discipline and the passion to succeed, right, where discipline just becomes this natural force that helps you, right, this natural fuel, this natural caffeine to get you to where you need to go, they will take a crap on everyone around them, because what they really want to do is hold a person down to their level. Douglas Adams wrote a great series called The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and one of his first passages is that one of these scientists created something called the total perspective vortex, and then they created another scientist created the infinite probability drive. The infinite probability drive is really what I'm talking about, but this guy figured out this fictional engine that would essentially be able to extrapolate the entire universe out of a piece of fairy cake. All the other scientists eventually killed him as soon as he succeeded, because they said, in the book he said, the one thing they realized is they didn't like a smartass. Right? And there's a lot of truth to that. If you're the smart person, if you're the person with the discipline, you're going to have to be very careful about how you surround yourself with your friends and family. And I need you to be acutely aware of who's for you and who's against you, because it'll be the weirdest thing. It'll be the weirdest thing. The more you succeed, the more you'll find out who's your friend and who's your enemy. And they're going to be people that you love on both sides of the fence. Random people out of thin air are going to be your supporters. That's going to be an interesting experience. Now, there's a lot of groups out there that mentor each other. There's think tanks. There's lodges. You have your Masonic lodges and that kind of stuff. And what'll happen is you start getting around like-minded individuals that see that your success is part of their success, because you're all a team, one way or the other. Again, with the gym buddy that I opened with, you have someone who's usually in better shape than you, helping you get to their shape. And if you ever get to their shape, then you become a mentor of somebody else, Who doesn't want the goal looking better? Who doesn't want that goal? Now, unfortunately, society is riddled with corporations trying to sell us products, again, that we don't need, that we shouldn't be ingesting. There's all these shortcuts in life, supposedly. And I'm going to tell you right now, the physical anomaly of shortcuts is that they really don't exist in most cases. Shortcuts are typically longer ways to do things wrong. And I'll give you a little story. I was in the Bay Area when I first got there in 91. That CDC boss I told you about in the last episode, he came up to me once and he said something extremely brilliant because he saw me doing what he thought, well, he was correct. I was doing something that I thought was a shortcut. And he walks up to me and he says, you know what? What I discovered was the truth about the universe. And I said, what? And he goes, it's better to take a shorter amount of time to do the job right than a longer amount of time to do the job wrong. And I heard that and I was like, well, duh. What the hell are you telling me that for? That's like the most basic piece of math I've ever heard in my life. And he said, you think you're doing something shorter, smarter, and right. And you're not. You are doing what you think is a shortcut. And it's turning into the longest, most drawn-out thing you've ever seen. And when you write code, for instance, you end up, if you do a shortcut, you're going to pay the price 10 times over. Now, sometimes we have to because of time and money. That's very rare. I had a video game that, my last video game made with a separate side company of mine. I'll give you two stories where this doesn't work. And this is sort of this is on discipline because people didn't have discipline to do the job right. But I'm going to tell you some of the ramifications of not doing it right. I had a really cute zombie game that I had made, and we all participated at many levels. But before we got started, because I have done this for 20 years, I told my coder, who is a new game coder, he'd done quite a few games for me, but really nothing quite like this particular game. And this was our baby, right? We're 50-50 owners in this title, which is a mistake on my part. And I told him not to cut corners. I said, I need everything to be configurable. This pipeline needs to be as clean as possible because as soon as we're done with this game, which was essentially zombies fighting each other, it was in a set in 1950s, really cute world. The zombies weren't gross looking. They were really cute. I said, we're going to need to make more zombies, once this thing takes off so that people always have a new zombie to fight with new funny moves and stuff. It's all slapsticky, really cute. Well, he kept saying, yeah. But then I would look in the code and I'd see a lot of hard-coded stuff everywhere. And I'd approach him and I'd say, look, this stuff looks really hard-coded. What's going on? Oh, well, I just did that for now because it's shortcut. I did this for now, shortcut. In the end, it absolutely killed the product. In the end, all of his shortcuts made him grumpy to make any changes in the product. And in the end, we had beautifully worked out the sequence of the end of the game so that you would be very pleasantly rewarded and very easily back in the game. Problem is, he ran out of steam. One, he took an extra 2 years to make the game. It was a 4.5-year project. In the end, he wanted to shut down the company because he just simply knew he didn't have the discipline to finish the game with all of his crappy code. Again, he wrote some brilliant code, unbelievably brilliant code, but all of his little shortcuts piled up and killed him. We lost over $60,000 out of our pocket because of all those shortcuts. And we borrowed money from people to make part of that money possible, but I lost a shit ton of cash. And that doesn't have anything to do with the amount of 5 years worth of work to make this thing actually happen, right? Because after we took 4 years to make it, we put it on the market for a year and it just couldn't go anywhere because the end of the sequence of the game was atrocious. And I actually redesigned and redrew all of the hard parts of the game to say, look, just put these dialogues in and we'll make it happen. And he gave up. But there's nothing I could do because I was ignorant enough to make a junior programmer a 50-50 partner because he asked nicely. Mistake on my part, which is why I have a 3-part. Well, that's why, I've got a couple essays that are audio ones on mkultraradio.com to help you understand why having a partner is a very dangerous thing. But I'll give you a bigger one. A more horrifying story of shortcuts. We had one of our biggest clients for my game company, Zero G Games. We had a client that was paying us approximately about $500,000 a month, just shy of $500,000 a month. I would walk into a bank, and with one client check, I'd deposit nearly $500,000 a month. All right, big client. And he made little toys that show up in Happy Meals. Let's just put it that way. And he's very famous to this day. My partner at the time was a great guy. We had this situation where all this code needed to go through this particular communication protocol. And he bought a little $800 piece of code to solve this communication protocol problem. And I told him, I said, I don't mind you buying that right now. But my office, because I had the south office, he had the north office with one of my other partners, I said, you're going to rewrite that as soon as possible so that we have 100% control over that code. Because if that code has any bugs in it, we're going to potentially eat the project, right? He put it off and put it off and put it off and didn't replace the code. And sure enough, there came a point in this code where when everything got really busy in the game, the code failed. And it was actually a failure that my team had already found in a previous very, very inexpensive project worth $50,000, and we had fixed. Well, it got to the point where one of the players in this particular project wanted the money that we were getting, and so they took this mistake, this code that had a bug, and threw it in the client's face and said, see, these guys don't know what they're doing. We can code this, right? And they had no experience coding, which was really funny. They lost the project eventually. But long story short, I lost a multi-million-dollar project because of $800 worth of code and one lazy-ass person trying to do a shortcut. There are no such things as shortcuts. If you adopt shortcuts in your mind, it better be that shortcut between you and the grocery store that you know the local roads and everyone's taking the main street, one of those type of shortcuts. Those probably really exist, right? Now let's get back to personal goals and personal discipline. We need passion. We need passion for what you want to do with your life in the area that you think you need discipline to accomplish that goal. Now, it depends on what age you are as to what your kind of goals you're going to want to do, right? If you're under 18, meaning you're not about to go off to college, then I'm going to say that your goal set is to develop as many skills as possible in as many crazy areas of life than you can possibly imagine, and not smoking cigars. If you want to play an instrument, go get it. I don't care what you got to do. Don't commit a crime, but someone will get you that instrument. Do it. If you want to learn how to do something mechanically, artistically, whatever it is, go do it. If you're in your 20s, well, it's all about executing those goals against a job. And you're never too old to learn a new skill. So I'm not saying you have to be under 18 to learn something new. Right. If you're in your 30s, you're in the middle of the era of life where society says you got to settle down. Get your spouse, get your kids rolling. I would definitely suggest if you're going to have any kids, you better get them out in your 30s. Because if you try to have them in your 40s, which you can, you'll just get really tired. You just better have a lot of stamina. In your 40s, 50s, 60s, and up, it's about maintaining life to the point you don't lose the cash cow that you have, whatever job you have, what have you. But given that we're allowing our politicians to throw all of our jobs out of the country, you better have a very, very specific skill. Warren Buffett has come out in the last 5 years and said the only people that are going to have jobs in America in 10, 20 years are going to be people with very eccentric skills. Now, some of that might be terrifying to some of you, but I'll tell you what, there are technical jobs that don't need a lot of unbelievably technical skills, and I'll give you one that's really cool. Programming robots is actually not so bad. And I don't mean programming the brains and all the software that tells a robot what to do, but getting a robot on an assembly line and moving the arm into place, saving that waypoint, moving it to another position, saving that waypoint, and making sure the arm can reach in, grab a piece, and move around stuff and put it into place and bolt it into place and move it back out. It's not so hard. It's not so hard. It's physical. It's all physical hand-eye coordination. You just figuring out how this is all going to work. You don't have to write any code. You're just basically telling a machine, okay, I've moved your arm to this point, save that point. I moved it to this point, save that point. And you can learn those jobs, and that's going to be a huge job. It's going to be setting up the robot for an assembly line and maintaining it over the years. And as new robots come out, there's going to be new hand-eye coordination stuff, and it'll be decades before that becomes a totally computerized thing. It's going to be something that someone does physically for a very long time. Now, the way that it's done physically might be done with software, but in the end, you are just going to be eyeballing it around and saving waypoints. Interesting, right? So let's ebb back into the discipline side of things with the understanding that Discipline isn't a problem once you find the passion of what you're trying to do. So I said with Tony Robbins, his big thing is to attach pain to the thing that you don't want and pleasure to the thing that you do want. And then the cool thing is, the good news, the shortcut, let's just say, is that your brain will automatically gravitate towards the positive. That's what it does. For any of you who've been in a bad relationship, or you've suffered a great loss in your life, someone passes away or moves away or whatever happened, right? We have this saying that time always heals. And it does. It's almost frustratingly beautiful how it does. That's because the mind will not accept negativity on a daily basis. It won't. If you're stuck in a situation where you can't escape your pain, now there's physical ailments, which I don't know exactly how to get away from those sorts of things, besides maybe looking at every opportunity you can to rid yourself of that pain, but hopefully not through pharmaceuticals. But let's just say prior to something that's debilitating and something that's a part of your body, hopefully there's remedies for you and whatever's ailing you. Definitely look up alternate means of becoming healthy if you're suffering from cancer. There's never been a better time to take alternate cures, B17, C, all kinds of cool stuff to get yourself cleaned out, right? But let's just say you're okay in that realm for now. Hopefully you're okay for that realm until the day you die. But a normal goal usually is something you set because it's something you really, really desire. And again, I'm going to stress with you, think big, think huge. And then taper back from huge to whatever you're capable of doing. And just understand that there's going to be milestones of achieving your goal with the discipline you approach, with the discipline you put on top of it, prior to you actually getting the actual big goal. And my caution to you is understand that you're going to feel great when those milestones happen, but you can't give up. You can't give up and stop going towards your end goal. That's one of the things I did as a kid, which ruined my normal growth pattern of art skills. And I think I've told the story in an essay a long time ago, which is that when I got into junior high, I had an art teacher, who he saw that I had a trend. And the trend was that I would beat every kid in class with what I was drawing, and then I wouldn't try any harder. And the guy actually gave me an F one year. And it's, I have like a straight A art student, and I bring in home all my projects, and they're phenomenal, blah, blah, blah. But he gave me an F. And the dumb thing is he gave me the F without the actual explanation of why. And my grandmother was a teacher and went in and kicked his ass, and they changed my grade. But I think I got an A after I got the F. It's really funny. But he told my grandmother, who was a teacher for 36 years, why he gave me an F. But he never told me, which was stupid. And this is what he said. He goes, your grandson isn't trying. He comes in, he does the bare minimum to beat everybody else, but never challenges himself. And I think the kid's an incredible artist, and he needs to really push himself. Now, again, the teacher, I don't think under one circumstance said to me, kid, what's your deal? Why aren't you kicking ass and taking names? Because I would have loved that sort of discipline. I love tough love. That's my thing. I think it's the shortest distance between 2 points is tough love. And every time you have to candy coat something for some sensitive soul, you're wasting energy. And you're wasting your own time as well. So get used to being disciplined quickly, because it's going to get more in your life than running around trying to feel your way through everything, right? But what I did was, again, I continued that process. I never really learned my lesson from the guy. I did push myself a little bit harder, but again, you're a kid, you get busy or whatever. When I came out here, I finally got an opportunity to persevere like I was supposed to in the first place, right? But discipline is not a black and white thing. It took 55 minutes to say this. It's a little faster because I'm going to cut this a little bit, but I'll say this much. When you try something new, you have a subliminal fear of failure. And when you have something that you think is a failure, you tend to give up, or you feel frustrated, or both. And I want to be your gym partner during this deep thoughts and just simply tell you it's completely and utterly normal. I have had that my entire life, where I'm trying to do something and I'm not getting the results that I want as quickly as I want. But I know through experience that that's what I've always felt. And so I simply keep going and going and going until I feel better about it. One of the things that will kick your butt is if you've never played the guitar before and you pick it up, or you played a long time ago and you have some songs memorized that you either played to somebody else's or you play your own stuff, which is what I do most of the time. You still need to have this sort of intimate understanding of the guitar. And if you play piano, same thing, or whatever instrument you're doing, you need to know where all the notes are, and you need to have your soul connect with, in terms of a guitar, the neck. I feel it going this way. Wouldn't it sound better if it went this way or that way? Well, if you don't have this innate understanding of where all the notes are sort of memorized, you can't get that beautiful oneness with your instrument. But the more you play and the more you practice, and I don't give a crap what you do on the guitar, it can all sound like trash, right? One of the cool things about electric guitars, they don't make a lot of noise if you just play them unplugged. But you can also plug them into your headset, and no one has to hear you mess up. But you just play, and you play, and you play. One of the pieces of information about Jimi Hendrix that came out really late in my life was that the guy carried his guitar with him every single place he walked on planet Earth. His Fender. And they said that it was almost annoying. Like, he'd walk into a club, and he'd just have his guitar with him, unwrapped, just everywhere he went. And, you'll see these hitchhikers on the side of the road with the guitars off their back. And I used to think that was a little silly, but now I think it was probably the only way they got really good at it. But what this brother did was he played constantly to the point where he knew where every note was, and when he felt something, he'd immediately be able to play it. And this goes for every single thing in the planet. That's what's cool about it, right? And I think that in his mind, I think he went to the military first, and he popped out, and then he just learned he was a really good guitar player. He played like a side gigs as a little backup rhythm guitar player, and then eventually he started getting opportunities. I think someone forgot to show up or couldn't show up at a particular gig, and he went in there and just murdered it, right? And everyone was like, who is this guy? Man, he's doing stuff that's totally original. And then when he got more and more successful, he got more and more control. And he said, look, I'm just going to rock, and you guys are going to listen, and I'm going to jam. I'm going to do blues. I'm going to do rock and roll. I'm going to do stuff you've never even heard of before. I'm going to do stuff with guitars that have never been done before, like play the Star Spangled Banner, for God's sakes, right? But he also took it up to an artistic level because he had experienced LSD. He had experienced all kinds of different psychotropic drugs, and he had seen the universe in a way that no one had seen it. And he managed to take that emotional, or visual hallucinations and experiences, and he put it into music so we can hear it, And obviously he had incredible band members that followed him around. He's not the only guy that did it, right? Tons of guys did it. Pink Floyd, The Wall, go listen to that. In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida, listen to that. There's tons of bands that pulled this off. And I'm not sure what journey you have to get your goal. But my goal in life, someone says, what's your purpose in life? My purpose in life is to blow minds. That's what I'm on this planet to do. And it doesn't matter how I do it at all. I can wash your car so good it blows your mind, I can write a song that blows your mind. I can write a piece of software that blows your mind. You feel me? I think that those sorts of goals are a lot more interesting and nebulous to have in your life than just say, I'm supposed to be the best one thing. Open it up a little bit. Maybe your goal is simply to do things that you love, whatever the hell that is, right? I say that sort of mezzanine comment between your goal and your discipline layer because it's sort of the glue between the two. If you can think of your purpose in life and it's something that you agree with wholeheartedly and you get excited about it, it'll fuel these two marrying each other. And I want to say, the more nebulous and undefined it is and scary, I'm hoping that you're able to turn that into something really exciting for yourself. And again, we don't have a lot of mentorship in the world. It used to be that we didn't have colleges at all for the normal human being. It used to be that most people didn't finish anything higher than 8th grade education. But we had no shortage of amazing inventions in the world by the same exact people that never went to college and never finished high school. My great-great-grandfather, Lewis Allen John, who lived to be 101, he fought in the Civil War a couple times. He popped out and made a bunch of inventions for farmers. And they said he didn't have anything over an 8th grade education. He's an extremely articulate human being, certainly wise to the world. I think he had 3 wives in his lifetime because he lived so long. He said that his father lived to be 104. He never had health care, by the way. The only health procedure he ever had was he had a tooth pulled out during the Civil War, which consequently he said was the only time he ever tried hard liquor, sort of numb the pain. I take that lesson, and he's just one of many people that self-educated and made it happen. So I mention him because I don't want any one of you to think that you don't have what it takes or that you can't acquire what it takes to get your dream. You can go learn it right away. You can have no knowledge in something, and I'm telling you, you've got friends already, or you've already done this already, where you're like, well, I didn't know anything about this, and I just bumped into it. I have a friend of mine who makes candles, and she just did it on her own. She found that in her local area there was a wholesale candle place where you could buy the containers, big giant bricks of wax, scent bottles where you could scent the wax, right? The wicks of all different, widths and stuff. And she figured out by looking online and looking through the materials on how to make candles. And so she eventually started making candles, and people said, "Oh my God, this is beautiful. Where'd you buy this?" And she said, "Well, I just made it." And so people said, "Well, I want one." And then someone else said they wanted one, and it just blew up into a business. It's crazy, right? That's just one little tiny example of how you can fall into something you never thought you could do. I filmed a lot when I was in high school. I said one of my essays a long time ago. When I came to Southern California on the second visit, the second time being down here in this area where I live now, there was a year where I was trying to find what I was going to do, right? I just had gotten done with electronic arts, and this is about a year before I made 0G. And I owned a XL1, which at the day was considered sort of a high-def-ish kind of camera. Wasn't really high-def, but it was really nice standard definition. And people started learning I had this camera, which at the time I think was like a $3,000 camera, and I had a couple $1,000s worth of lenses I attached to it. And so people said, "Look, we need you to film here, film there, film there." So I started filming with my little XL1, Canon XL1. Well, then they said, "Okay, that camera's not going to work for this particular project. We got another big camera for you." And it was this big 50-pound, normal industrial strength broadcast camera. And so I went down and filmed the U.S. Open here in Newport Beach, filmed concerts, filmed all kinds of crazy. I was rolling around on a concert stage all dressed in black because these musicians wanted to have videos made. And so one thing led to another, and I made money filming me, right? Here I was, a manager of a 55-man team in EA, and now I'm essentially self-employed, rolling around filming with a camera. Bizarre, right? So stranger things have happened in the world. Now, you may live in an area of the world where there's not a lot of kind of, in your mind, sort of opportunities. But there's two types of opportunities in the world, right, that you can have discipline to go and grab. And one would be, well, I'm going to open up the white pages, or my newspaper. I'm looking to help wanted ads. I'm going to look on Craigslist and find the people who are looking for other people to help them. That's surrendering your goal to someone else's goal. And nothing wrong with that if you got to pay the bills. And by the way, you can learn skills in those other jobs. Take them as serious as possible, right? During the same time I was filming with a camera, I bumped into an Italian restaurant with a buddy of mine who owns it, and I loved his pizza. She's from Brooklyn. He was making Brooklyn pizza here in Huntington Beach. And he and I just hit it off. I did his website, his catering website. We had a lot of incredible successes with that. Then he said, I like it when you come at night. When I have to go home, I have my employees taking care of the place. And I like it when you're there because you tell me the truth about who's actually working and who's not working and how the pizza's being cooked and that kind of stuff. And he had a couple chefs that would actually kind of injure the pizza. They started making like CPK or something, which is not Brooklyn pizza, right? Still tasted great, but, it just was funky looking. In the midst of trying to find what I was going to be doing with my life, right, my second tier of work, which ended up making games again, I started bussing tables. I started talking to the customers. I started going in when it was really hot. I would show up because I got them programming some games, and I would show up to get my dinner. And I would just turn into like assistant manager. I've never worked in food in my entire life, I was always like a stockman or something, or a retail guy. And so I had a blast. And I didn't consider the job below me or anything like that. In fact, it was like I finally get to do that thing I never did as a kid, which is work in food industry, which is weird. I went back and made pizzas. My buddy taught me how to cook a lot of the Italian dishes, shrimp scampi's, and various sauces and stuff, which were very intricate to make and that kind of stuff. And it was just really fun and really cool. So I give you those examples because there's nothing below you and there's really nothing above you. So dream as big as you can get, but know that maybe there's a bunch of little things you'll do in between to get that bigger goal. And so, sorry, I was busting this table, right? Let's say that's 2003, the whole year of 2003, somewhere in there, starting around, say, June. And it went into 2004. And then by the end of, say, 2007, I was depositing those $500,000 checks I was telling you about. And this was a company I formed from scratch with one of my employees at EA. I'll give you another example. When that company started, he and I were making about $5,000 a month, which is nothing, especially compared to what I was making at Electronic Arts. And again, they had a bunch of layoffs, and my child moved from the Bay Area to LA, which is why I moved down here with her. The minute he and I formed a corporation to wrap around our work, we went from making $5,000 for multiple little games to making $50,000, $55,000 for our first game that we made together, which was a little more difficult than those other little games, but not much, And so we got more than a 10x boost in our pay. I mean, he and I split it, right? But I guess we had 5x boost individually. But for what we were creating, we got a 10x, over 10 times the amount of money. More than that, because we were making one game instead of 3 for the same money. But if someone had said, you can't do that because it doesn't make any sense on paper, there's no way you can jump your income from $5,000 to $50,000 or $55,000 for one game when you're making 3 for $5,000, we wouldn't have tried. So it's a ridiculous thing to think in our minds, and we never had that limitation, right? We dreamed huge, and we made it beyond what we ever dreamed by the time the company was closed. And so, I've seen this work in my own life, and I just want to pass it on to you, that don't get hooked up in little anomalies where you get stopped, and don't dream small. How could you possibly reach a big goal and a big dream if you don't dream big? Now, I'm not saying leave your wife and your kids and run off and do something crazy. I'm not talking about anything like that. You can always work it into whatever you're doing. There's always time. And if you have to make a little tiny change in your work habits to find that time, then do it, I have friends of mine in the rock and roll business, and they are constantly busy going to concerts. They know everyone, so every time they go to a concert, it's always VIP, side stage, or really close to the stage thing, and we all meet them afterwards and that kind of stuff. So there's this cool ecosystem of things I love to do. However, if it's between me going to a bunch of VIP concerts and me doing something on my own at home, and maybe say I do half of those concerts or a third of those concerts or 25% of those concerts that they're doing, but I've written a new film that you're going to see in the theater. I will have hopefully blown your mind with this movie, but I will have surrendered that other recreational thing. Now, when it comes to pastimes in America, there are tons of them, right? And we have this thing that we're now affectionately calling Jeopardy versus Mensa. And what that means is the people on Jeopardy aren't necessarily intelligent. They're just fantastically memorized, right? They memorize stuff to answer questions, right? No part of that is intelligence. That's a facilitation of intelligence, but that's not intelligence itself. Knowledge needs memory, but most of the time, intelligence needs you to think, needs you to deduce, right? And that's where Mensa, which is this big society of people who think, come into the mix. And if you give the top winning Jeopardy guy a Mensa test, you're not guaranteed they're going to even pass, let alone do well on it, right? We have to be the Mensa people. We have to be the thinkers. Yes, you're going to have to memorize a bunch of stuff to do something in life, but that's just facilitating what you're actually doing with that knowledge. I mention that because when you develop goals that are based on regurgitating things, saying what you've memorized, there's usually a cap to that and a limit to that because there's someone else out there that's already done what you're talking about. You want to be the person that has thought of something that no one else has ever thought of, and it's going to take a little while to probably distill that out of your system. A lot of you will have beginner's luck, and it's because inside you've actually been brewing an idea for a very, very long time, and it finally pops out as your first adventure. And so some of you will make more money on your first thing than you ever make on the next ones. That's why we have a lot of one-hit wonders out there in the music industry. They made great songs, and that was it, right? Flock of Seagulls made I Run, and that's about it, right? So discipline, like I said at the very beginning, and I'm going to button this thing up, not go an hour and 40 minutes here, but discipline comes with natural hesitation and natural, what I would call attrition, loss. For every time you put something in, you're not going to gain usually 1 for 1, right? You put your packets of energy in, your calories of energy in, and you're not always going to have a success. And you may actually have a day where nothing goes right. Don't freak out. Don't freak out at all. It's just that day. And maybe, again, you go a week and it just, whatever magic was kind of thriving up to that point, maybe you're sick and you don't even know it. Your energy level's down. You don't know it. Maybe you've been staying up so many hours that you're just sort of, totally chill, relax. Seriously, really relax. Go do what you got to do. Take that vacation if you can take it. Whatever, sit in your sofa, relax. Whatever makes you calm, do that. And that doesn't mean watch television and watch your favorite sports game and get all pissed off because your sports team doesn't win. Hopefully you don't care about any of that bullshit. To the degree you worship these other paradigms, to the degree you actually won't probably be able to get what you need because you're going to be consuming your time with things that shouldn't be consumed. But again, I'll play a game every once in a while, right? I still log into World of Warcraft and probably pay 5 minutes a day just to kind of push my characters around so that if they ever come out with an expansion that's worth playing, I'm like, oh, my character's at least ready for the expansion, right? So I have my vices as well. I'm not trying to be holier than thou. And again, it relaxes me because I'm not doing anything. I'm not running dungeons or anything. I'm just chilling out. I'm usually like listening to something, taking in new research or watching something funny on the internet. And then I just get relaxed, and then I push forward. Another thing you might do with your discipline is just upper-level techniques that you might do besides cutting yourself some slack, which I think is the number one thing that people don't do, which is why I'm stressing it with you, is to pick something that you really want to do and make it a reward at the end of doing at least a tiny milestone. And a milestone can be two things. A milestone can be something you've accomplished, and a milestone can be something you tried to accomplish. Either way, you put the effort in, and either way, you're better for it. So you say, look, well, like for me, I write tons of code constantly. So for me, I'll say, I'll pick a module and I'll say, well, I got to get this done before I can smoke a cigar. Something like that. I mean, what a goal, right? Hurt my health after finishing something. But let's just say it's go to dinner, it's be with a friend, it's watch a movie, whatever it is. I try to put a goal before I get the reward. So it's another technique you can do that is extremely helpful. But again, to wrap this up, set yourself goals. Don't set them too low. When I first came to California, one of the things I said to my friends after about 5 years, especially working for that tax company, is that I set my goal way too low. I came from a place that said, you can't do anything unless you have a college degree. And I believed it, which is complete and utter bullshit. And so all I wanted to do was be a professional programmer. Well, I was a professional programmer within 4 months of arriving in California. 4 months. I'm 18 years old. I'm only 4 months 18, and I was one of the key contributors to this product. And I was drawing the fonts, I was drawing the artwork, drawing the manuals. I mean, I was doing all kinds of crazy stuff. And I was done with my goal almost instantaneously. And so then it was like, what else do I do? Oh, I guess I become a better coder. Boring. Plus it was tax software. Well, I didn't take my video game background from high school and move it into the game industry. I don't know. But, a couple of years later, I got laid off and I became a video game artist, which is how I got into the video game industry. I had to get laid off to get that job. And even though I went back and forth between normal companies and game companies, I eventually ended up in game companies full time. I should have set the goal really, really high from the very beginning. Now, if you're a parent, hopefully you could pass a little bit of this information down to your kids as well. Whenever you think it's time for them to hear that. As well, try to subtract out of their life, without them knowing it, the distractions that are robbing them from having the attention span to get these goals. One of the big things I have when I teach art with kids, and I've said this before, is that they just don't have the attention span to create anything great. Because no one sits down with them and say, okay, whatever we draw today is perfectly fine with me. However, you're going to get an 8x10 sheet of paper, and you're going to draw for 1 hour on that piece of paper. You're not allowed to have another piece of paper. You can't flip the notebook. You can do whatever you want on that. Use whatever mediums you want, mix and match. It can be gross when you're done, but I want you to do it for 1 hour. Because those who live in art work for months and months and months, usually on one thing. Blizzard Entertainment, which makes some of the best CG trailers for their video games on planet Earth, they win Emmys and all kinds of stuff for their shorts. It's crazy. They work pixels forever and ever and ever for months and months and months. One person will stare at a scene that's like 5 seconds for a couple months to make sure it's perfect. And there's hundreds of them working together to stitch it all together to make it look amazing. They win awards. Their resumes are now amazing. A lot of these guys have went off and work for Industrial Light and Magic and Pixar and all these big boys, Weta, because they have the skills to write their own tickets after that. Now, you might say, well, that was a ridiculous waste of their time sitting there forever on one scene. Isn't that just monotonous? And it's like, well, not when they bring home the $200,000 check. Not when they have developed skills that no matter how old they are, those skills are still ripe, still amazing because they're creatively, living inside stuff. And guess what? Once you spend 5 months looking at a particular set of sequences and seconds, the next time you do it, it's 3 months. Next time you do it, it's 2 months, then 1 month, then a week. And now you're going to be able to create magic very quickly. And that could be you in anything that you do. It doesn't have to be something fanciful or crazy, right? But again, right now on planet Earth, there's no better time to learn whatever the hell you want to learn. There's videos on YouTube of every single thing you could possibly want to do. A lot of us are fixing our cars now in ways that we never thought we could fix our cars because there's forums with photographs of how to take things apart. I replaced my power steering motor in my HHR because it has a faulty power steering motor, and they wanted almost $500 for the whole thing, the parts and labor. I bought the part for $83 and put it in 15 minutes because I had photographic guidelines from some weird forum, some crazy ugly forum, but a guy had posted all the photographs. So I just printed them all out, did it myself. So there's nothing that you can't do right now at all. And so I just want to situate you in your mind that way. Discipline, it comes and it goes. It's normal to have it be really rich one day or for a week. Just understand that if you start slipping, it's okay to walk away for a little while, but it's also good to have different projects that you can do to relax. So one of them is maybe you're trying to create a big painting and it's kicking your butt because you lost your train of thought or whatever. You got everything done, but there needs to be more. Well, do another painting that has no goal at all. It's just throwing paint on a canvas, or maybe something else that you like to do that has nothing to do with painting. Move around in a round robin. That's the way I live my life, right? So I write code, I do artwork, I do digital Photoshop artwork, I do paint on canvas artwork, sketch in a sketch pad, I'll write scripts. I have a lot of things, so I just go in circles, and it's amazing how one thing influences another. It's strange. Or you'll get so bored of one thing that you can't stomach thinking about it anymore, and you go to this other one and you're just frothing. You're just like, oh, right, I forgot I love this. Beware of out of sight, out of mind with your goals. Don't hide things around your house. I've talked about instruments. Don't put them off in cases and hanging them on your walls unless you're a rocker like Kyle, who's going to always have to get them out to rehearse. For those of us who are just normal human beings, you need to have things out and about. So clearing out a place in the spare bedroom, in your office, in your garage. I mean, honestly, if you don't have any space, take everything off the back of your toilet, up on the wall behind your toilet, and just put the painting there and sit backwards on your toilet and paint. I drew one of my best, back in the day, one of my best profiles, self-portraits of myself sitting on my toilet backwards. And I would look at the mirror, and I'd draw. Look at the mirror, and draw. So you could do crazy cool things in every place on Earth. So anyway, if you made it this far, I'm cutting this one a little short because I've been going too long lately. Thanks for listening. Again, Deep Thought's whole goal is to talk about things we don't really talk about that often. And again, you can tell I'm riffing, I just try to make it interesting, right? I do want to say that most of the big YouTube channels, they try to tell everybody to subscribe. They tell everybody to share. We are getting that pretty organically, so we're pretty satisfied with it. But if it does occur to you, I've been told to say it, because if I don't say it, sometimes you don't remember. There is a subscribe button down there. If you subscribe, you get notice that one of these videos is dropped. If you subscribe to our podcast, you're coming through the audio side of things. Definitely subscribe to whatever podcast mechanism you have. Just remember that iTunes only gives out about 9 episodes. They don't give out anywhere remotely the hundreds that we've done. And the way that this show is actually listened to is it's sort of like a big giant encyclopedia. None of the knowledge really becomes obsolete other than current affairs. But all my essays are current any day of the week, usually. I have pulled a couple because we've been sucker punched by a few things like Ebola and that kind of stuff. One of our most viewed videos / audio thing, I didn't videotape it, but it was the one on Ebola. And we realized we really got had by it. I just pulled it because it wasn't, we didn't need to scare each other with that. So we're pretty good about kind of pruning our feeds over time. But anyway, if you haven't gone to mkultraradio.com, go there. Everything's there. YouTube, podcasts, the videos. There is a tab for Deep Thoughts if this is just your bag. We had a technical difficulty this weekend recording a show, so there won't be one this Sunday. I'll probably get this out tonight on Sunday night, but I forgot the equipment when I went up to by Kyle's house, staying with a friend of mine, so we didn't record, but that was my fault. We're trying to make sure that the shows are actually have a good level of quality and consistency to them too, and not just completely riffing. So just be aware that we're aware of all that situation. If you haven't joined us on Facebook, please do. Just click the Facebook button on mkultraradio.com and please join the page. Again, we don't really care how many likes we have on the page, but we care about the contribution from the listeners. That's for us is the big deal, because it's the only reason why we made this show in the first place, is to find like minds. But again, thanks for listening. Learn the rules that rule you. Over and out.